5 months ago, Alcaraz won the Australian Open and completed the full Grand Slam set. Youngest man ever, Djokovic beaten in the final, Lopez getting the hug, Ferrero nowhere in the building. Today, the two-time Wimbledon champion sits in Murcia while Sinner cruises through London. The official reason is the wrist. But this week, a rumor exploded that Ferrero finally admits something bigger. A new woman in Alcaraz's life. Supposedly, the real reason he is not at Wimbledon right now. Is it true? That is exactly the fight happening in every tennis group chat right now. Half the fans say the old coach would never go that far. The other half point at his track record since December, the interviews, the hints, the liked posts, and ask why a man who wanted peace keeps making noise. Brooks Nader walked away clean. Peggy Gou walked away clean. So if a woman exists, she was never in a player box. She would be somewhere much closer. That is either the story of the year or the biggest lie of the season, and I am laying out both sides. Comment your verdict before watching, then see if it survives. Subscribe and let us start at the crack. The timeline starts on December 16, 2025, with a statement nobody in tennis was prepared for. Carlos Alcaraz posted that after more than 7 years together, he and Wonky had decided to end their journey as player and coach. He thanked the man for making his childhood dreams a reality. The wording sounded warm, almost like a farewell letter between family members. Then Ferrero released his own message, and buried at the end of it sat 5 words that turned a routine coaching change into a mystery the sport still has not solved. He would have liked to continue. Read that again. Coaches who agree to mutual separations do not write sentences like that. Men who got pushed out write sentences like that. The details leaked within days, and they were uglier than the statement suggested. Ferrero told Marca that Alcaraz's camp sent him a new contract proposal on Saturday, December 13th, and gave him until Monday to accept or walk. A 48-hour ultimatum for the man who had guided Carlos since he was 15 years old. Money was not the poison, according to Ferrero himself. The friction lived in what he called non-sporting clauses, in the direction of the career, in things he refused to spell out. A source close to the camp told Spanish media the real battle was between Ferrero and Carlos Alcaraz Sr., a clash over who controls the most valuable career in tennis. The father runs his own academy in El Palmar. Ferrero built his empire in Villena, an hour away. 2 kingdoms, 1 prince, and only room for a single voice in his ear. Understand what Ferrero gave up to build that prince. He took a 15-year-old kid from Murcia and constructed a champion piece by piece over 7 seasons. 24 titles came out of that partnership, 6 Grand Slams. The youngest world number 1 the Open era had ever seen. Coach of the Year honors landed on Ferrero's shelf in 2022, then again in 2025, awarded just 6 days before the split went public. Alcaraz used to call him a second father in press conferences. When the end came, Ferrero described it as a deep wound and admitted he was hurting, that he had poured his heart and soul into the project. He said he needed months for the pain to pass. The man sounded less like a fired employee and more like someone going through a divorce he never wanted. Now watch what the kid did next, because this is where the story earns its drama. Most players crumble after losing the only coach they have ever known. Alcaraz flew to Melbourne 5 weeks later with Samuel Lopez holding the reins and told reporters he had the same team as last year, just 1 member missing. 1 member missing. That is how he described the architect of his entire career. Cold, casual, delivered with a smile, then he backed it up in the most brutal way possible. A 5-hour, 27-minute war against Zverev in the semifinals. The longest semifinal in Australian Open history, cramps and all. Djokovic waiting in the final, unbeaten in Melbourne finals his whole career. Alcaraz took the trophy anyway, and at 22 years old, he became the youngest man ever to complete the career Grand Slam, breaking a record that had stood since 1938. His first tournament without Ferrero, and he walked out holding the one prize that had always escaped him. The message did not need words. Melbourne showed something else too, something the cameras could not stop capturing. During his 4th-round match against Tommy Paul, the crowd threw 3 marriage proposals at him in about 10 seconds. "Marry me, marry my daughter, marry my sister-in-law," all shouted between points while he grinned back at them. The sport had crowned a new golden boy, a Louis Vuitton ambassador with a Rolex on his wrist and sponsors lining up behind the smile. When the press tried to diminish Lopez by hunting for a bigger coaching name, Alcaraz snapped back hard, calling the comparisons unfair and describing Lopez as one of the best coaches on the tour, a man with his complete trust. Loyalty flowing to the new lieutenant while the old general sat home nursing his wound. Every headline about it landed in Villena like a small knife. Melbourne also gave birth to the rumor "you came here to settle." During his quarterfinal against de Minaur, cameras caught an unfamiliar face in the player box. A woman, clapping, invested, clearly inside the circle. The internet identified her within the hour as Peggy Gou, the South Korean DJ, and the connection deepened when fans learned the two had shared a dinner in Seoul earlier that month. Alcaraz got asked about her directly and gave an answer that fed the fire instead of killing it. She was a friend, really cool, and he hoped to win so he could watch her perform on finals weekend. Charming, playful, completely deniable. Around the same time, an old rumor resurfaced from the previous September when the sister of Sports Illustrated model Brooks Nader told E! News that Brooks was dating the man of the hour. Nader herself refused to confirm or deny anything, joking that a lady never kisses and tells, especially twice, a line aimed at whispers linking her to both Alcaraz and Sinner. Most insiders eventually wrote the whole thing off as promotion for her television show. Alcaraz, asked in Melbourne whether his heart was taken, laughed and repeated one word 3 times: free. So by February, the pieces sat on the table. A bitter ex-coach with a wound that would not close. A superstar suddenly surrounded by female names. A father with new power over the empire. Alcaraz kept winning through all of it, taking Doha without dropping a beat, demolishing Arthur Fils in a 50-minute final, running his record to a level where people started whispering about a perfect season. Daniil Medvedev finally snapped the streak at Indian Wells and the tour exhaled. The kid was human after all, barely. April is where the fall begins, and it begins with his rival's hands on his throne. Monte Carlo, April 12th, the 17th meeting between Alcaraz and Sinner, the #1 ranking on the line. Alcaraz arrived as defending champion with a winning record against the Italian, including 6 victories in 7 finals between them. Sinner took the title anyway. Their rivalry had produced staggering symmetry, each man sitting on 26 career titles, each having spent exactly 66 weeks at #1, and Monte Carlo broke the tie in Sinner's favor. 2 days later, Alcaraz walked onto a court in Barcelona for a first-round match against Otto Virtanen. He won it. Nobody watching had any idea they were witnessing the last completed match he would play for months, because somewhere inside those violent, whipping forehands, the tendon sheath in his right wrist began to tear itself apart. The next morning, everything changed. The withdrawal from Barcelona came first, announced the day before his scheduled match against Machak, framed initially as precaution. Then the MRI results arrived, and precaution turned into catastrophe. Tenosynovitis of the right wrist, an inflammation of the sheath protecting the tendons, the kind of injury that ends seasons and haunts careers. A direct bill for the brutal topspin that made his forehand famous. Alcaraz posted about Madrid on April 17th with words that read like grief. "Some news is extremely hard to give," he wrote, calling Madrid home and admitting it hurt not to play in front of his people for the 2nd straight year. Rome fell off the calendar next. Then came the announcement that shook the sport properly, his withdrawal from Roland Garros, a tournament he had won twice running. On May 19th, he closed the door on the grass too, pulling out of Queens and Wimbledon in a single statement, saying his recovery was going well, but his body was not ready, calling them 2 truly special tournaments he would miss. Deeply, promising to keep working for the fastest possible return. 6 major events gone. A wrist splint photographed on his arm at the Laureus Awards, where he collected World Sportsman of the Year while unable to hold a racket properly. The New York Times noted that wrist injuries rank among the most serious a tennis player can suffer, and every Spanish fan reading that sentence felt their stomach drop. Even his rival flinched at the news. Asked in May whether his own French Open chances improved with the champion gone, Sinner refused the bait entirely, saying tennis needs Carlos, that the sport is much better when he is around, that he personally likes having him there. Remember that quote, because it matters for what comes next. The man racing Alcaraz through the history books showed him public grace. The man who raised him showed him something else. Into that grief walked Ferrero, thumb first. On April 20th, 3 days after the Madrid withdrawal, fans noticed the former coach had liked an Instagram post from Radio Estadio Noche, speculating that Alcaraz would miss Roland Garros. A like, one tap on a screen, and the fan base detonated. Screenshots spread across every platform by morning. One viral reply captured the mood perfectly, wondering what more this snake could do, noting he had unfollowed Carlos for distance, yet tracked every piece of bad news. Another fan wrote that every time people thought Ferrero could not get worse, he found something more pathetic. The man who had spent Christmas describing his deep wound was now, in the eyes of the fandom, enjoying the sight of his old pupil bleeding. Fair or not, the snake label stuck, and the question underneath it grew louder. Why does this man keep circling? He kept talking, that much is documented. In March, on the Spanish show El Cafelito, Ferrero admitted he wanted to see Carlos again, hug him, smooth things over, and confessed that deep in his heart, he could not say no if Alcaraz ever called him back. He also let slip something more revealing, agreeing that family and environment may have influenced the split. By June, his interviews had become a minefield. He told an Italian outlet that they barely talk anymore, the odd congratulations after a title and little else, then admitted he misses the way Carlos carried himself on court. Aggressive, yet always smiling, a kid he watched grow from 15 into something he never thought possible. That same interview blew up in his face when a quote began circulating about Alcaraz's $9 million yacht purchase, a custom 88-foot catamaran, with words suggesting Ferrero would have blocked it and raised Carlos like his own children. Ferrero erupted, posting an official statement calling the misquotes unacceptable, attaching the ATP transcript, and telling fans directly not to believe everything they read, to check original sources and draw their own conclusions. Hold on to that advice because it applies to the very rumor that brought you here. Here is what Ferrero actually admitted, on the record, with cameras rolling. He confessed that he was the guy who said no to many things inside that camp. He voiced genuine concern about Carlos's habit of mental resets and vacations, pointing specifically at a pre-Wimbledon trip to Ibiza, and delivered the most honest sentence of his post-split life. It made him doubt whether Carlos, living that way, could become the best in history. Distractions like that, he warned, tempt players into losing focus. Notice what is missing from every transcript, every interview, every verified quote: a woman's name. Ferrero never blamed Peggy Gou, never mentioned Brooks Nader, never pointed at any girlfriend, because as of this very week, Carlos Alcaraz has no confirmed girlfriend at all. He has said it himself repeatedly, in Melbourne and everywhere else. The internet took Ferrero's real warning about lifestyle, stitched it to old box seat photos, and manufactured a mystery woman out of smoke. So was the title a lie? Look closer. There is a new presence in Alcaraz's life, one Ferrero genuinely fears, one that arrived after December and took the seat he used to occupy. Her name is Freedom. The Netflix documentary spelled it out, an entire film about his philosophy of enjoyment first, called My Way, released while the partnership was quietly dying. Kyrgios saw it from the outside months ago, saying he would pick Sinner between the two because Alcaraz loves girls, might party too much, could get distracted. People laughed at him then. Alcaraz himself handed the prosecution its best evidence in a March interview, admitting there were times he refused to stop for a break and that it led to poor tennis or injury, cutting himself off with the words, "Let's just leave it at that." A man who plays through warnings from his own body eventually pays, and the payment came due in Barcelona. While he paid, the hungry challenger feasted. Sinner arrived at Wimbledon with the #1 ranking locked, the draw wide open, and his greatest rival watching on television. The Italian had stumbled at Roland Garros in a stunning early exit, watching Zverev lift the Paris trophy instead, so London became his redemption stage, and he survived a tough first-round battle to keep it alive. The tournament itself moved on without its two-time champion, loud and star-studded, with Serena Williams stunning the sport by returning to play first-round singles on the same lawns Carlos once owned. The ranking math turned cruel in his absence. He clings to world number 2 for now, but every round Sinner survives in London stretches the points gap wider. Punishment collected while the injured man cannot answer. Ferrero, ever present in the story, weighed in on the rivalry in June and declared that Carlos remains ahead, a compliment wrapped in a reminder that he still measures the kid he built. He has also said openly he would consider coaching Sinner if the chance arose. Sit with that image for a moment. The second father, available for hire, leaving the door open to the one man his son is racing through history. The kid, meanwhile, refuses to disappear quietly. Through June, his Instagram became a recovery diary, and fans dissected every frame. A collage on June 17th showed concerts, food, and glimpses of court work. Sharp eyes noticed he had been hitting balls left-handed for weeks, protecting the damaged right wrist while easing his body back toward tennis, a detail that told you how carefully this comeback is being built. Then came June 28th, the eve of Wimbledon, when he posted footage of himself gently striking forehands for the first time since April, captioned with a single holding back tears emoji. Shapovalov commented immediately, urging him on. Becker, Zverev, Berrettini, Dimitrov, and Wawrinka all pressed like. One fan reply summed up an entire nation, confessing that their emotional stability depends on that wrist. Davis Cup captain David Ferrer, in regular contact with him, reported the recovery progressing well and revealed Carlos was answering messages at dawn, hungry to compete, refusing to return until the risk of re-injury dies completely. The target is the North American hard courts, with the US Open beginning August 31st, the very title he currently holds, won last September against Sinner in the final. Picture that comeback for a second. The defending champion, written off for half a season, walking into New York against the rival who spent the summer collecting his abandoned points, with his estranged mentor watching from a television studio and choosing his words carefully. The wrist will decide the tennis. December already decided everything else. She was never a woman waiting in a box seat. What pulled Carlos Alcaraz away from Wimbledon was the collision between a body pushed too hard and a life lived exactly his way, and the only man who warned him about both is the man he left behind. If this changed how you see the whole saga, tell me in the comments whose side you land on now, Ferrero's honesty or Carlos's freedom, because that debate is far from over. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the moment that wrist is ready, the greatest revenge tour in modern tennis begins, and you do not want to hear about it secondhand.